2024 elk hunt in eastern Oregon, northeastern Oregon.
In the rearview mirror.
So talk to me about what led up to this year's hunt, because this was different than years past for you. Talk to me about how it all came to be.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest difference this year is I tried hunting with a stick bow, which I honestly wouldn't recommend to the faint of heart who'd like to come home with a cooler full of meat. Spoiler alert. But it just, it was different for sure for a lot of reasons. I mean, I'd hunted this section of northeastern Oregon this was my third season going there. I'd had success, big bull up on the wall. I took from this unit a couple years ago with a compound bow, and I've just been really excited to go back there. One, because I knew the area, it's great country. It was honestly part of the draw and me moving to Oregon is I just love some of these corners of Oregon that have these really cool places. And
well, that's the neat part about Oregon is you're within a day's drive of so many opportunities.
Yeah, I like the way you emphasize day's drive. It is a full day to get over there. But,
hey, you know what? Everybody's days are different. You know, you can get to Montana in 23 hours. Anyway.
Yeah, pedal on the right all the way down. Yeah, it was different for sure. And I mean, shout out to the folks at Archery Country in Austin, Texas, who hooked me up with a sweet traditional bow, and I spent a good amount of time this summer learning how to shoot it.
So what was that like? So you've shot compound your whole hunting life. You know, what was it like to pick up a traditional bow for the first time?
Yeah, so first of all, back up. How did we get to this traditional bow thing? I used to, well, this isn't something I did by choice, really. You know, I put in for this unit, it's a draw unit, and I put in with a couple of my buddies from Texas. And me being new to the Oregon kind of resident draw system, I didn't really realize that when you put in with a non-resident, you basically go into the non-resident draw.
Correct.
And so it really hurt my odds of drawing where I wanted to hunt, and we didn't get a tag. So then I'm, you know, in the leftover tag draw, I'm looking around trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I thought about doing Roosevelt's over here, and then I was like, man, when I moved to Oregon, I really pictured myself going back to this area and being able to drive there. I had to fly there and then drive in the past, and so I was like, I just really want to go back there. And then I found out they had over-the-counter traditional bow tags, and they basically don't sell out because I guess you got to be crazy to want to do it. So I was like, you know what, that gets me to where I want to be. I'm just going to go in and not have any expectation of being successful in bringing home an elk, but I'll be successful, and then I got to go hunt in this cool area that I want to go back to. I feel like I know it well enough to think I can get into some elk, and I'm going to have fun and learn to do a new thing. So that's how I got the tag. When I ended up getting the tag, I also was unsuccessful in convincing anybody else to want to go with me because no one else wanted to hunt with the trad bow, and no one else wanted to go for a hike for 9 days just for
Sorry.
fun. This guy being one of them.
Want to? Yes. Able to? No.
But anyways, that was actually kind of exciting to be able to do this by myself, and especially when you're bow hunting, especially with a traditional bow, it's like you hate having someone else to blame for why you messed up, you know, when you're trying to creep in on an animal or doing a calling sequence or any of this stuff. And so going by yourself, you remove that whole element of excuses.
Sure.
Right? Like you're under your own power. If something doesn't go right, there's no one else to look around to and be like, that was your fault for stepping on that stick.
But you can blame that you didn't have a collar. Like that's why it didn't work out.
Yeah, and so that's how I ended up with the tag. I ended up going by myself, which I was, you know, was different, but excited to do. And yeah, I got the bow. The folks at Archery Country hooked me up with a sweet traditional bow.
Yeah.
This summer I spent a few months shooting it and kind of getting comfortable with it.
What was that like in comparison to shooting a compound? Like what was that learning process like?
It's totally different. I mean, I feel like I did it backwards than most people that learn archery, where most people get into it, you know, in middle school or something, in archery class, and they're shooting a recurve, and it's all instinctive, right? It's like shooting a slingshot or throwing a baseball. There's not like something you look at to line up the sight. It's just kind of like you aim it where you want it to go, and you know it's going to go there. And that's totally different than a compound bow, because in a compound, you got a peephole to put your eye on, you got a specific anchor point, you got pins that are lined up for me from 20 to 70 yards, and you kind of just put it where it needs to go, and if you do everything right, it generally goes there.
Yeah.
And learning the traditional bow game, it's all instinctive.
So You set your outer threshold at what, 30 yards, 35 yards for?
In the yard, I said like 25 to 30 yards. In
Yeah.
practice, I stretched it to 35 in the
So
field. And
in contrast to 70, 80 yards with a compound bow.
Oh,
So in
yeah.
elk hunting, like that's the difference between 60 to 70 yards and 30 is like
monumental.
huge.
Yeah. I could have killed one bull 5 different times with a compound bow, and then 2 other bulls for sure 1 time each with a compound bow.
Well, before we get, let's get into the hunting stories here in a minute, but before leading up to going, what did the physical preparation, kind of look like as far as getting ready? Now this is full backcountry, steep country, by yourself in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
What did you do to get ready physically for this hunt?
Well, I use elk hunting as a motivation to stay in shape really for the whole year.
Yeah.
But especially once it gets to be like summertime, like I kind of do the Murph workout, and at the end of May and Memorial Day is something I get motivated for kind of uniquely. And then after that, when we hit like June, I just started kind of thinking about elk season, right? And I just don't want to ever have to look at a hill or hear a bugle in some like remote place and think, I can't go there. Like I can't get myself there and back. And so I use that as motivation to just work out, get in shape, go running, do CrossFit. And that's most of what I do. You and I do it together all the time, of just mostly CrossFit style workouts with some running worked in, some hiking, some rucking, high intensity, sometimes high duration type stuff that tries to mimic what we do, but is...
Well, I noticed doing the HIIT, which is new to me, doing the high intensity intervals, how much better I've done in the mountains as a result of that. Like you don't think about like a 15, 20, 30-minute workout at that high intensity translating to, performance in the mountains, but it's incredible.
Yeah. I think the big thing about those style of workouts too is it makes you physically tough, but it also makes you mentally tough.
No kidding.
Because a good workout, every time I know it's a good workout, I get like halfway into it and I want to quit. And that's how, like every time I hit that place, I'm like, oh, okay, this means it's a good workout. I'm not going to quit, but I want to.
Yeah, and so that's why it's good to do that with someone else.
Yeah.
So, right on. Well, so you took off, this was a late September typical archery hunt. So you
Last
took
week
off,
of the season.
Yeah,
took a week off work.
You took off from Southern Oregon. You had a day's travel.
Pretty much a day's drive. I got up super early because I wanted to get there and do an evening hunt when I got there. And one of the things I should mention about this place is this is my 3rd year going there, and the previous 2 years I've gotten to know, in these big swaths of mountain country, a lot of these areas have packers at the trailhead. So basically a guy...
It's an outfitter, basically.
It's an outfitter with a bunch of horses that, during the summer will run people up in the mountains for a camping trip on horseback, leave them up there in a tent, come back and get them, or... during the hunting season, they transition to running.
So they're everything but a guide. They do everything to get you in and out of the country except for basically guiding an actual hunt or whatever.
Yeah,
like
and some of them actually do guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I got a disclaimer that I do know the guy that runs this pack station really well. I'd call him a personal friend. We keep in touch in the off season and work on some projects together. And so when I go to this place, I have that in my back pocket of like...
Gotcha.
His name is Dave. He's a legend. He's like a living, breathing Daniel Boone. That's someone that you wouldn't think still exists in 2024. Just an absolute legend in my eyes. But, I go into the backcountry by myself, not as like, you have no idea what you're getting into if you kill an elk 14 miles from the trailhead. It's like, no, I've got an inReach. I can, reach Dave, and, all I got to do is cut up an elk, get it in a tree, and he'll meet me there the next day on horses to get it out.
Gotcha. So day one, travel, and did you get an evening hunt in?
I did. Yeah. So day one, traveled, got there about 4 o'clock, kind of threw some gear on. I was just ready to go for a walk anyways. But in this particular area, there's usually a herd of elk that hangs out kind of on that 2 to 3 miles in fringe. So I was like, if I can run back there, I can at least maybe hear some calling or something. And it's a tight little area at the front, and then you got to start going up this steep canyon and then drop into the real backcountry where I want to be for a whole week. But I knew there's like this one little group that always tends to hang out there that everyone else walks past. So I was like, if I get there in time, I'm going to throw my clothes on and grab my bow and run out there. And so I actually ran out there. I'd gotten a herd of elk exactly where I thought they would be the first night. And since I knew I wasn't going to hunt there the rest of the week, I just went in there super aggressive. I was like, I'm only gonna hunt this spot tonight. No matter what happens, I'm leaving tomorrow morning and I'm going to the backcountry. So I'm gonna run at this bull. It was a bull, bugling, cows, like perfect scenario.
Oh, wow.
And I get up in this herd. We're kind of on this avalanche slide, bunch of alders in the bottom.
Like picture perfect.
Yeah, perfect. And they're hanging out just on like the other end of the alders, and I'm kind of in the bottom, like in the stream bed, basically looking up at them on the above the alders in the bottom. And the crazy part is, like, first of all, with a rifle, 30 minutes in, there's a dead bull, right? Because when I first saw this bull at the bottom end of this herd in the open, he's at 100 yards.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so
if you're Mike, that's a dead bull with a bow.
yeah, well, and then, so I get really aggressive with this guy, and the problem is the alder patch. Because for anyone who hasn't hunted in that kind of steep country that's loaded up with alders, it's just unbelievably thick. And these branches are all kinds of squirrely, and they just grab you.
Was there a bunch of blowdown and everything you're crawling through?
And other parts of like big timber, yeah, but this is like 12-foot high alders that are real stringy, and you just can't walk through them. And in fact, a lot of the elk go under them.
Oh my goodness, got it.
And it's kind of wild.
Yep.
And without getting on all fours and like getting your bow caught in everything and making a ton of racket and sounding like a wolf running through there, like you're not getting through them.
Yeah.
And so what I was trying to do is basically either call the bull through the alders or get to a place where the alder's skidding down enough that he's up on one side and I'm up on the other, which is great with a compound bow because this alder patch was kind of like 100 to 50 yards wide, just kind of squirreling through the bottom. And there's one point where I had him at 60 yards, like I'm up on this side, he's up on this side. And I could have, an hour into the hunt, probably tagged him with a compound bow.
Pretty nice bull.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, herd bull, but not like crazy, nothing insane, like probably 270 type of bull.
Sweet, though.
Yeah, great bull.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get him to come into the alder patch. And then so eventually I just was like, look, I'm going to be aggressive here and I'm just going to charge through this thing. And as soon as I started trying to charge through it, I tried to cover myself up with just calling, right? So I sounded like a bull coming through there. And he just blew out. I think he saw an opportunity where, one, I'm a human trying to get through a place where elk can go, and it's just so slow because I'm getting hung up in everything. And he's like, oh, a real bull would have just run right through there. So he had time to start like panicking and kind of gathering up his cows. And
Gotcha.
by the time I even got close, I could tell by the sounds they were making that they were going up and over the slide and out of this canyon.
Oh,
So I blew him up, and that was evening one. Basically packed it back to the truck. I didn't even stay out there till dark because I knew that I blew him up.
Once you blew a canyon, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went back, slept in the back of my truck, and got ready for the rest of the week.
So now talk to me about, day one of actually going into day two of your hunt, but day one going in, how far were you going in?
It's about 14 miles. It's a long ways.
Gotcha.
And you go through some kind of just open country on the way in. That's pretty unproductive for hunting. And so I always like to say you're either hiking or you're hunting.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can make that transition if you need to from hiking to hunting, but for the most part, it's like, nope, strapping the bow on, like we're going hiking.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty much a full day of hiking.
Gotcha.
And you go, where I go to hunt, you go about 3,000 feet up in elevation pretty consistently for most of the mileage. You crest over the pass and then you drop 2,000 feet down pretty quick to this river valley floor, if you will, and I camped kind of right at the river in the bottom.
Well, it's gorgeous in that country. Like, even if you're not hunting, it's worth hiking into that country.
100%.
Anyway.
Yeah, so day two was mostly a hike. I did get out. I got my camp set up enough time that I could, basically climb up an avalanche slide, just 200 or 300 feet so I could see over the trees at the bottom of the valley and just kind of watch as the sun was going down. And I actually did locate a couple herds of elk, through binoculars way across the valley that I kind of pinned and, went and found where they were coming out days later.
That's so cool. Just to be around that much elk activity is awesome.
Yeah. It started out hot and heavy, and then we'll get to the middle of the story. There's a couple days that you can just kind of click past.
So before we leave that first day in, so you set camp, just out of curiosity, so you probably had to work quite a bit to get your system all dialed in to be ready for, 7 days in the backcountry, 8 days in the backcountry?
Yeah.
So you had all your food, all your supplies, everything for that period of time, and to go that far in, that must have been a hike. Like
It was a hike.
like not just
Yeah.
a hike, but a hard hike.
Yeah, it's a hard hike. It's,
Are you
again,
going to
full
what,
day.
60 pounds, 70 pounds?
I'm kind of a minimalist. So like I've gotten pretty good over the years at slimming my backpack down.
Yeah.
I'd say it's like 50 pounds.
Okay.
So it's still heavy, but it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
like, it's definitely a different kind of heavy than packing anything out.
Sure.
Your knees aren't crumbling on you. It's like, oh, this is heavy.
Copy that. All right. So day 3 then.
Yep, so I get camp set up, wake up bright and early the next morning and go out hunting. And that morning was actually pretty promising. In fact, the whole day was pretty promising. I was thinking this week is going to be epic. So the morning, there was some, before it even got daylight, I could hear some bugling from the tent. Nothing crazy, just kind of consistent in a couple different directions. So I got out, hiked an area that I kind of pinpointed as being an area I wanted to check out. And I'm not lying to you, I hadn't been over there an hour. And I look up and it's timber, kind of hillside timber, north facing slope. And this cow just starts charging down the mountain, elk cow. And I caught her at like 100 yards above me and just kind of watched where she was going. And as she went behind some trees, I ran up to get closer to where I thought she'd spill out. And she ran 20 yards in front of me, just running downhill like she's being chased.
Oh, weird.
So I'm like, it's the rut, something's coming. And a calf ran with her, so a cow and a calf.
Got it.
And I mean, 20 seconds later, I can hear something else coming. And at this point, I've moved up, so she crossed in front of me at 20 yards. And so down the hill, I can hear the noise, kind of that anticipation, like, is this going to be a big bull? Is this going to be a wolf? Like, what's going to be?
Yeah.
And around the corner, kind of turning down the trail, I just see a spike. Short little spike elk. So a little junior middle school action. But he ran by and he didn't take the same path this cow took. He kind of took one little trail further away from me, which was really unfortunate. And I was committed to shooting any legal bull on this
Well,
trip.
the trad bow?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
with the trad bow, was like, if I get a chance at any legal bull, which is just antlered bull, I am going to take it. And so I was like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, okay, you said you were about it. Let's be about it. And so he came down the trail. I called and stopped him right parallel with me on the hillside. But he was, instead of at 20 where the cow came, he was at 35. And it's really easy to sit here at this table and be like, my limit was 30 yards. And then
No, it's not.
and then and I didn't range him. It's just like I ranged it after the fact, but I kind of knew I was pushing it. And it was so quick. He's like, I froze him. He's broadside. He's just literally just statue still. He's like, I'm gonna give it a go.
Yeah.
So I pull back my bow, and in trad bow, it's not like you pull back and there's like all this like anchoring and pin and
No,
everything. It's just fully instinctive. It's like pull, release. And I felt good, and that arrow just flew through the air and just dropped right below his belly. Honestly, didn't even scare him that bad. I think he just heard the noise of it going in the brush behind him, and he ran down the hill, I don't know, 20 or 30 yards, and then stood back and tried to like look around and, what was that? What was that? And I cow called and tried to cover it up, and he just kind of looked at me for a few minutes and trotted off. And by the time he had run down the hill, he probably got out to like 45 yards. And at that point, I'm like, too far.
Yeah.
Not a chance. I just missed it 35.
Which is like a chip shot. I don't think I've ever shot anything with my bow less than 45 yards.
Yeah,
with
it's
my
a
compound.
chip shot with a compound bow. I mean, to call it a layup is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
So that happened in the morning. And then that evening, and I promise these days are not going to all run this long. This is just action-packed day one in the backcountry. But that evening, I decided to go check out where I'd seen this herd come out the night before. Because I knew there was a big herd bull in there. I could see from a long ways off.
What's this country look like that you're in?
River running through mountains that look like Rocky Mountains anywhere in the West.
Gotcha.
Kind of tight canyon, steep on both sides. Kind of avalanche slides coming down.
So you're dealing with what, 2,000-foot canyon walls on each side? Right on.
And I wouldn't call it canyon walls. I mean, you could walk up most of it until you get to the peaks. So like just steep timber.
Gotcha.
And so I went across the valley. It's about a 1.5 mile hike to where I'd seen these elk come out the other day. And I'd go up to like exactly the spot that I'd seen them come out of the forest the night before. And I just sat there at like 2:30 in the afternoon. Basically like took a nap.
Yeah, and sunset's what, 7 o'clock right now?
Like 6:30 over there.
Gotcha.
It's way east.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hung out there, just like they did the night before. They came out like a little later than the night before, probably 30, 45 minutes before it got dark, like right at sunset. They came out a little higher up than they did the night before, so they were about 100 yards above me. And so I just kind of slowly crept up until I was 20 yards below the bottom cow. And they had come out into the slide and were feeding in the kind of grass pockets.
How many?
They're like 15.
Oh, wow.
But no bull in sight. And I'm like, last night there was a big bull in here. I could see, couldn't tell how big because I didn't bring a spotting scope. I just had my binoculars. I could tell from a long ways off there's a big bull in there. I don't know how big, but I can tell he's got antlers and I can see him from here. I waited. I was like, man, I am right in here. I got the thermals going downhill. I'm 20 yards from the cow. If he comes out, I can just kind of cow call enough to get him interested to come down on this side of the herd. And I got him. Well, he never came out. And it's getting dark. It's like, less than 10 minutes to go until dark. It's like, Hail Mary. And so I threw out a bugle. And I'm a pretty non-aggressive caller unless there's a reason to be aggressive. Right? Like I feel like my philosophy on elk is I'd rather go unnoticed. If I'm in elk, if I know where they are, I'd rather just be silent. And then if there's an opportunity to cause commotion and get something going, then I'll take it. But I'd rather just be stealth.
Well, I've screwed up more scenarios calling than not calling.
Yeah, well, and the right type of calling is deadly. But I think more times than not, it's better to just be completely unknown. And so I threw that out the window. I threw in like my best middle school age bugle, just of like, hey, something's going on here.
Yeah.
And this bull came screaming out of the woods at the top of the hill, at the top end of the herd.
Oh, wow.
And he doesn't even think for a second about, coming down to check me out. He's just panicking, rounding everybody up.
Yep.
And the cows were close enough to me. I think it kind of startled them. They're like, what in the world? I don't see an elk right there. And so they started just kind of, it was like a whirlwind tornado of elk running around, and they just blew up out of there, and that was that. And walked back to camp in the middle of the night, sad. A pretty good hike too. I mean, you gotta.
Well, that's pretty cool in day one to have that many encounters.
Oh yeah, I thought I was
awesome.
in for the best week elk hunting ever.
Well, what happened after that? So that's
So
next night in country.
One interesting point is my water filter quit on me, which I've never had happen before. And big lesson learned, always bring a backup water filter.
Yes, sir.
So I didn't have I had, a water filter that fills like basically you get a clean bag or a dirty bag and it's got a filter and then a clean bag at the bottom. And it just was totally plugged. And I figured this out right when I got back to the backcountry because I wanted to refill my bladder after the hike in before the first evening. So I went down to the creek, filled up the bag, and the filter would just no flow. Zero flow.
You couldn't backflush it?
I tried squeezing it. I tried, flipping the water over, putting in the dirty side and trying to flush it out. I even boiled water and then poured it in there trying to see if I could, one way or the other, flush it out. It was completely
So it's just
jammed.
one of those little inline filters?
Yeah, just completely
Those plug
jammed.
up pretty easy.
That thing's never let me down. And I clean it after every trip I go on. And I think I just took it for granted. It's probably a $20, rebuy before the trip that, lesson learned. It's like, just get a new filter and don't risk it. But I didn't have a water filter, and I learned that like right when I got there. And it was one of those things, I'd literally been there for like 30 minutes. I just set up my camp. I walked 14 miles, and I was like, what do you do? Like, is this a go back scenario? I don't know. And so I dug through my bag after I did this whole try to fix it, not work thing. And I found I do carry a life straw, which it is what it is. It is a life straw. It's meant for like survival.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like your go-to water filter for the week. It's literally a straw that has a filter in it that you drink out of. Like, you need to like drink it straight out of the stream. You're in deep kimchi, or put it in your Nalgene and drink out of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, option A, I go back to the trailhead and burn a whole nother 2 days, probably 1 day out, 1 day back, to get a water filter, which I'm not doing, where I use the life straw all week and commit to that life, or I just say screw it and drink clean water and risk getting Giardia and try to find the clearest water I can find. So I went with option life straw.
Yeah.
And it was fine. It was just a major inconvenience.
Yeah.
Major inconvenience. And so I couldn't fill my bladder up, which I could have probably, and then just drank out of that. But I was kind of holding out hope that I could find some other way or fix my filter just through repeated effort and refill that with clean water. So I didn't fill up my bladder, but I had a Nalgene, just like a half the size of this one, I think 32-ounce Nalgene.
Yeah.
And so I just filled up that and then drank out of the straw, out of the Nalgene. The worst part is like when you have a bladder, you can fill it up and go a whole day without going to get water. When all you have is a Nalgene, it's like, okay, at some point every day I have to go to get water. So if I hike all the way up
Because you
that
only
mountain
had
for my
32
morning
ounces of storage.
hunt, yeah.
Ugh.
So if I hike all the way up that mountain for my morning hunt, it's not like I can just take a nap and hang out there till the evening hunt. It's like, no, I got to come all the way back down to the creek, get water, and then go back up there if I feel like it.
Dude, that 6 ounces you saved from that extra filter.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was a big lesson learned. And so the interesting thing is on that end of that, this circling back to the end of that first full day in the backcountry, on the walk home, I passed another hiker or a hunter on the trail who ironically was also hunting with the trad bow.
Oh, wow. What are the odds?
He was really friendly. He was actually back there with llamas. And I told him, I was like, dude, we talked for a couple minutes. He's a friendly guy. We're just kind of exchanging all the history we each had in this area. And I was like, man, can I just ask a favor? Can I use your water filter to fill up my bladder? So he said, yeah. And I filled up my bladder and I was like, I'm not going to touch this all week because I got to hike out of here.
Yep.
This is my emergency water.
Yep.
And it's my hike out water. And
Yep.
then I can get by with this Nalgene all week knowing that's like, okay, this is just my day water. And so made it work, but big lesson learned.
Yeah, I would.
Bring an extra water filter.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. We on the PCT trip Dan and I just took, we had some less than ideal water that we had to deal with on that trip. Not to go into too many stories, but we plugged up a brand new MSR pump filter because just in filling maybe 3 liters, it plugged completely. And we hadn't read the instructions on how to clean it. We couldn't get it unplugged. Fortunately, we had a backup Sawyer and made it through. But yeah, water's a big deal.
Yeah, luckily where I was, there's pretty clean water, but still, it's like...
We were drinking out of like elk wallows.
Yeah,
like,
I saw
it was
the pictures.
Gross.
It was gross. There were mosquitoes in that water.
It was bad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That was some Giardia water.
Yeah. Anyway, we're still alive.
The funny thing is that guy I talked to on the trail had gotten Giardia. He said he worked as a logger in Michigan and got Giardia working up there, and all he did was tell me how bad it was and scare me that much more about what I was signing up to for the week.
Well, so that was the end of day 3. So day 4, second full day in the backcountry.
Honestly, there's a couple days in there that are just a total blur. I mean, let's just say the next 3 days, nothing interesting happened.
Gotcha. So fast forward to day 7.
A lot of alone time, a lot of Marshall with his thoughts, thinking about every conversation I've had with every human I care about for the last 2 months. So let's just call it like day 6 or 7 or something.
Call it day 7.
So I did have something interesting happen that day. One of the days I just decided to hike way up on the hillside. Now on this north-facing slope, there was tons of sign. And I think what the reality is, the elk had been there all summer. And whether it was through hunting pressure or just because they moved on to like their fall range or habitat or whatever, I don't think they were in there. But there was so much sign, it's like, you can't walk past this. I mean, there are elk highways, there are rubs and scrapes and wallows and everything you look for, just no living, breathing elk.
I had that last year. It was rough. Anyway.
Yeah. So on this particular evening, I hiked, I don't know, it was probably a good like 800 feet in elevation up the side, which is pretty vertical, so it's pretty straight up. So I'm like, almost halfway up the side of this valley, and I can see across, and I'm in a really good place. I'm in where this avalanche has basically created a clear cut that's in reprod stage, and there's Christmas trees everywhere that are 10 feet tall. Ooh. And there's grass, and it's green. I'm like, this is a perfect place to be an elk.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I can hide in it. There's enough, just enough cover that I could if an elk came out, I could maneuver through it to get close and be downhill this whole section. It was perfect. So I was like, I'm going to stake out here. I'm going to make my claim right here. And so this is 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like, I'm just going to use the water I got. I'm staying right here today. I'm taking a nap. And this
So how far were you moving from camp to these different locations each day? It mile,
depends.
2 miles, 3 miles?
I don't know. I felt like every day I'd walk a loop that ended up being somewhere between 6 and 8 miles.
Okay.
Over the course of the day, you're not walking fast. You're not really hiking unless I'm coming in at the end of the day. But, it's just... you're moving slowly throughout the day, kind of still hunting and checking out areas.
So you're still covering 5 to 8 miles every day.
Yeah, I'd say on average for sure.
Yeah.
And so on this night, I just decided to stake out on this place. And ironically, I was up just kind of above my camp, but vertically pretty far. And of course, it's like I bet my night on this spot. It was the highest I'd gone up in elevation gain since I've been there in the valley. And big storm comes in, like an hour before sunset.
Yeah.
And I can start to see it come over the mountains.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just like,
Well, the
that's
storms can
interesting.
hit pretty
I
quick.
haven't seen that all week. It's been nothing but sunny and hot. And all of a sudden the wind started to blow, and then the storm got dark, and then it started sleeting, and then there was big flash of lightning and thunder, and then the wind just unleashed. And I'm in this big blowdown, not where I was, but all around me, and what I had to go through to get back down to my camp was all just like timber, blowdown, avalanche slide, just nasty country. And I'm kind of getting terrified, honestly, because one of my reservations about staying up there until the nightfall was going back down in the dark. But then I didn't envision going back down in the wet dark and the windy wet dark.
Yeah.
Where it's like you're walking on all this scree and it's slippery.
It's like when we were coming down
and it's
McLaughlin.
windy. I was like, I don't want to do that by myself. So then I kind of hit the panic button. I was like, I'm getting off of this mountainside. And I'm walking through this timber, and I've heard like 3 trees snap and fall down. I'm kind of panicking, like getting back to my tent. I made it back to my tent, and I got there. It started sleeting harder and kind of raining. And I just was like packed it in. I was like, I'm getting in my tent. I'm cooking my mountain house under my little canopy thing, and I'm going to sleep. So this day's over. But that night was like an interesting highlight of the trip because I don't know if you spend a bunch of time in the mountains. Like I feel like those storms just like do things, just wake everything up.
Oh yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
As soon as the storm ended, like I don't know, midnight or something, I was asleep. But everything woke up. All the wildlife was like, it's time. We're coming out.
Well, it seems like I hear more bugles in the middle of a storm. Like if you can actually hear through the wind and everything else, like the bulls just light up.
Yeah. Yep. So the middle of the night, it's probably 3 a.m, cold asleep. And I like startle myself awake. And I mean, I am like so asleep that when I wake up, it's like, where am I? What am I doing? What am I sleeping in? Kind of that asleep.
Yeah.
And I realized that the reason I woke up is there's literally a bear like a foot from my face, like sniffing into my tent. Because I think what happened was like I was hanging my food bag out of camp a little ways in a tree, but I'd put my next day's worth of food with like a summer sausage roll and a bag of trail mix in my backpack in the tent.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I knew was like, could bring a bear in.
I do it.
But I was like, I just want to be able to put my boots on, put my backpack on in the dark, in the morning, not have to go deal with my food hanging in a tree and walk out of here.
Yeah.
And so I think it was just investigating. It wasn't threatening, but like
Well, you weren't in grizzly country. This is a black bear.
black bear, for sure black bear. And it's just like kind of startling when you realize that the reason you woke up is because a bear's like literally trying to sniff its way into your tent. I mean, just like big, like, like huffing sniffs. And you're just like, oh my goodness, this is not home. So I woke up and I couldn't even get words out. Like I was gonna try and yell, but I was like so asleep and
I can
couldn't even get words out.
I can picture
I think I
that.
just kind of yelled at it. And it kind of like slowly lumbered off. It wasn't like terrifying. It was just like, oh, not easy meal. So that happened, and then like within the next hour, 2 different deer came into my camp and just stood there and stomped and blew at my tent. Which was like so frustrating. It's like, dude, I'm trying to sleep in here. And they did that thing deer do where they just huff and blow at you for 5 minutes.
I'm traumatized by that noise.
Yeah. I'm not even deer hunting, but it still riles me up to hear that. And so they run off. And then the most frustrating part was like, you know, is that time in the morning where I'm like starting to get like, oh, I should probably get up, put my boots on. So I start like putting my boots on. It's still totally dark. You're not hunting yet, but it's that time to get up so that by the time it's light, you're out hunting.
Yeah.
And I'm not lying. It's like a herd of wild Mustangs running through my camp. A herd of elk come through. I mean, there must have been 20 of them, but it felt like my tent was going to get trampled. Deer run through the wood quietly.
Yeah, not elk.
Elk run through like wild Mustangs that are being chased.
Yep.
And I don't know what got into them. I don't know if they smelled me and panicked or what it was, but they blew through, like running around my tent. It all happened in one night.
One storm.
Yeah. Thought it was going to be a great day of hunting. Everything went quiet once the sun came up.
Oh, really? How much rain or how much precipitation was there? Just a short
Not
squall?
a lot. Not even enough to really wet anything. There was like some sleet, a lot of wind, a little bit of rain, but nothing to write home about in the way of precipitation.
Gotcha. So then this is going into what, day 8 now, roughly?
Yeah, and this was my last day back there. Nothing really happened, to be honest with you. It's probably day 7 because I ended up coming out a day early. No, I mean, honestly, nothing to write home about.
Gotcha.
I hunted all day, decided I was going to leave a day early because I was still thinking about those elk that I'd bumped out of that canyon on the way in. I knew my buddy Dave was done guiding hunters. So I was like, oh, I need to talk to a human. Because I literally saw that guy the first night of the trip.
Yeah.
And I didn't talk to a human the rest of the week.
Gotcha.
I didn't see another hunter, didn't talk to anyone. I was actually thinking about it. I think I went 5 days, maybe 6 days without saying a word, like a verbal word.
Yeah, and how many calls do you normally do per day?
Oh, dozens.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of relished in that and embraced it, but I was also thinking about, I don't know if I've ever done that in my whole life, to go that many days without
I haven't.
uttering a word.
I haven't.
Which is kind of cool, and it was kind of a cool challenge. I started recording videos like the first day or two, like a vlog style, and then I was like, nope, not doing this because I want to see how long I can not talk.
There you go. Right on.
Which was interesting. So I ended up hiking out. I think the day after the storm, I stayed that whole day. I did shoot a grouse that day, which was cool.
Oh, yeah,
I
I saw that video.
Came back to my tent midday, and actually walking back to my camp, I was kind of just going to take inventory and start getting ready to hike out early the next morning. But I walking down the hill, and a grouse kind of scuttled out of the way, so I pulled out my pistol and ran over there and bagged a grouse, and I threw it in my, I didn't have anything to cook on, which I usually bring like at least some aluminum foil so I can like build a fire and kind of fry it up. I didn't even bring that. And so I literally put it in my jet boil, like cubed it up on a log, put it in my jet boil and made like grouse soup. I ate the grouse out of it with no seasoning and then poured the broth into my mountain house for lunch, which actually, I don't know, turned out all right.
Almost wouldn't be bad to just pour it right in the mountain house, this grouse and everything.
Yeah, I probably ended up getting a couple of cubes in there, but it was also chicken teriyaki mountain house, which, hot take, is the worst flavor. I was thinking the broth would have helped it out, but folks at Mountain House, a lot of your stuff is good, but that flavor needs some work. So anyways, I got all fired up about going back and trying to see if that herd had come back into that canyon close to the trailhead, and then catching up with my buddy Dave. So hiked out a day early, and I got back to the trailhead again like 4 o'clock, so I was able to squeeze in an evening hunt. And I went by Dave's cabin and he wasn't there, so I just went out by myself, and it's 2 or 3 miles back to where this herd is, down a different trail than I'd gone in on. And so went back in there, got back to the end of the trail, and kind of got right in on these elk right where I left them. They'd just kind of come back over the side and were back in the same avalanche slide they were in before. They got right back into them.
Wow.
And for like, from like 5 o'clock until it got dark, I was inside this herd of elk. Like, for those elk hunters that have been there before, it's like rut madness. There's like cows and bulls all running around, and you're literally just like inside the herd. Like everywhere you look, they're on all sides. And there's one herd bull, and there's a bunch of satellite bulls running around. And again, probably 2 times that night could have shot that bull with a compound bow.
Yeah.
He was, everything I was doing, I was getting aggressive at calling because he was aggressive at calling. He would call back, he'd move my way, and he wouldn't come under like 60 yards because he didn't.
That's the hard thing about solo hunting.
Yeah, he didn't see anything.
Like
he'd come out to where he needed to see where the sound was coming from.
If you had a caller.
Yeah, and I'm, just ducked in on the end of the trees, and he's like, "Where's the elk?
Yep.
I'll come, but show me the bull."
Yeah. Yep.
Right? He's ready to play ball, but he's just not seeing the ball. And so this was like 2 hours of frustration. I'm literally just like basically feeding down the hillside with him, chasing him, trying to call him back. And he wants to come, but he won't do it unless he sees me. And ends up not really working out. I did have a raghorn, like 2x3, come basically charge in on me. and run up to like 12 yards.
Whoa.
And stood there, and he did that thing that, you know, satellite bulls do. He came in totally quiet and just stood there and looked at me through the brush.
Yep.
Like eyeball to eyeball. It's like, you son of a gun. What are you doing? And it's thick enough brush. I'm like,
You probably only saw his face too. You probably didn't see anything else.
Well, I could see his chest. He's totally facing me, frontal view.
Yeah, no.
He's 12 yards away. Again, I'm not ranging. I'm just guessing. He's close.
Yeah.
And so he stands there for like 5 minutes, and I kind of laid off the calling because I didn't want to blow him up and cause him to, you know, get the herd stampeding or anything. So I wait, and then he kind of gets bored trying to look for what he's hearing. He doesn't see anything, so he starts looking back. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it. I'm going to try and shoot this bull. He's a little raghorn. I'm like, it'd be a sweet bull to get with the trad bow.
Yeah, yeah.
So as soon as he turns his head, I draw, spin, release the arrow, and I watch the arrow flight go right where I want it, just whack, dives off down the hill. I'm like, I just smoked that bull. To the point I almost got my inReach out and texted my buddy Dave. I was like, just smoked a bull. Didn't, but I thought about it.
Yeah.
I was like, get the horses. I was about to do it. And I was like, you know, let's just go over there a few minutes, see what happens. So I'm like thinking I nailed this thing. And I can still hear the herd bull, you know, bugling, going off. I'm like, okay, I got this one, hunt's over. So I wait 15 minutes or so, and then curiosity kills me, and I kind of walk up and around this alder thicket that we were looking at each other through. It's high, so, you know, I can see under the foliage, but there's a bunch of these branches kind of between where he was and I was.
Yeah.
And so I walk up and around that. I'm literally standing in his tracks. I can see where he pushed all the dirt away and blew off the side of the mountain. And I'm like, I smoked him right here. I'm, you know, looking down there to see if there's a blood trail starting. I mean, full frontal, like I saw the arrow was going right where it needed to go. And I turn to my side and something catches my eye, and I got white fletchings on my arrows, and I see something white, so I look over, and like if I'm where the bull was standing, there's a stick like right here that my arrow has gone through, and the broadhead is sticking out of, and the fletching is just hanging right there, and it's like a foot short of where the tracks that I'm standing in are.
You pinwheeled a branch.
Just totally pinwheeled a branch. I was like, well, mystery solved. Didn't smoke that bull. So I was like, wrenched my arrow out of the stick and put it back in. First of all, you don't have a quiver on a trad bow. It's like on your back.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another major problem when you're going through brush. Is
Yeah.
These arrows sticking up on your backpack catch everything.
Uh-huh.
So I shoved it back in there and ran back off with this herd, got right back in them. Same thing, just, you know, cat mouse all the way down the hill. And I couldn't get him to close the distance, and so I basically put him to bed and dropped a pin like literally under the tree he was bedded under, and walked out of there. I even jumped some of his cows trying to walk out of the herd.
Oh my goodness.
In the dark. And so I went back, I told my buddy Dave, I was like, dude, this is hunt number 2 that I could have killed this bull with a compound. He's like, I'm coming out with you tomorrow. I'm going to call for you. So this is literally last day of the hunt.
Yeah.
And to make a long story really short, we go out the next morning, we get right back in him. We're out there at 0 dark 30, so he's literally still in the bed that I left him in. We start calling, he comes down, but he doesn't really do it. And we just kind of follow him along the hill and basically put him to bed middle of the day. We didn't have the wind right, things weren't right, so we just decided to back out. And then I knew I had one evening hunt, and then I needed to blow out of there the next morning to make it home. Get back to work, get back to see my family.
Yeah.
And so here we're going in the last hunt. Evening, we're like, tonight's the night. We're being super aggressive. So we know where he's bedded with all of his cows during the day. We're going to go up, we thought there'd feedback where they came from during the day. We get below him. We wait for the wind to shift to make any noise, right? So as soon as the thermals drop coming down, because he's above us, we start making cow call. And Dave is just like the best caller I've ever been around. I've never been around a caller like this, and I felt like I was going to elk calling university.
Yeah.
It was insane. I did not know you could call elk like this. He put on like a 2-hour spectacle of Dave calling university. And he walked me through it after the fact of like what he's doing, but he's like painting this, he's like, I'm painting a picture. And I start with one brush stroke about what's going on down here, right?
That's so
like
cool.
Just a couple cows. And he's making cow calls, different sounds, trying to paint the picture. There's a couple cows hanging out in here, and they're just hanging out. They're bedded down. It's like,
I love it. The storytelling.
This elk, he's lost control, man. A couple of his ladies have come bedded down here through the day, and they're starting to get antsy and stir around for the evening.
Yeah.
So, and he's bugling back every once in a while. He's kind of hearing them. He's like, no, come back, join the party. It's over here. And then, he builds and all these cows. Now he's walking around, making walking around elk sounds for these cows, just cows. For an hour, it's just a cow party. And then all of a sudden, like middle school bull shows up and just like a little, like I'm trying to bugle, but my voice is cracking bugle. And you could hear it in the response bugle from the elk. It was like a panic. The bull up the hill was like, oh no, I've lost the herd. And so he starts coming, right? And I'm up on the hill probably, 50 yards above Dave. He's in the bottom, like literally standing in the stream bed. And so, I'm trying to position myself every time the elk bugles and Dave's bugling back down below me. I'm just trying to find that middle ground. Like wherever I feel like he's coming, I'm getting in between them.
Yep.
And so I'm like kind of zigzagging back and forth as this.
Well, they never come straight.
No, they never come straight.
It's either they're going to come to the wind, whichever direction.
And by the time David started making bugle sounds, we're an hour into painting the elk picture.
That's impressive discipline.
Yeah. Well, and he'd go 5 minutes making no noise, and you could tell the bull was like, what's going on down there?
Yeah.
What's up? So he'd like throw out a bugle, and then Dave would respond and start to repaint the picture.
Hard to get.
Yeah. And then, so the bull starts finally really engaging, and Dave's dialing up the party down here where it's like he's throwing rocks, he's raking trees. Now he's bugling like he's a threat, right? Like he's somebody that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And so the bull's coming, but the bull doesn't come straight in, and he doesn't come quick. He's got 20 cows up there. So he's like trying to manage the bar scene up there, while also trying to manage the bar fight he's about to get into outside. And you can hear his cows like telling him, "Don't do it, Bob. You don't need to mess with that little guy." And his cows are like sweet talking him, and you can tell he comes to us like 20 yards, and he goes back to them. And then he comes to us, he's coming 30 yards, and he's like, no, I need to go check on them. There's too much going on up there. So it's like one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of in the elk.
So you're like 100 yards away from this bull at this point?
Oh, I was probably 60 yards, but it's thick timber. We're in a big timber patch. And so he's up at the high end, I'm in the middle, and Dave's in the bottom.
Super steep?
Super steep.
Yeah.
So he's coming like straight downhill to me.
Yeah.
Zigzagging.
Yeah.
And finally, like, it was crazy. Like, there were points, once Dave really dialed it up, he's bugling as loud as he can bugle, and he's getting covered up by the real bull right above me, and I'm like halfway in between both of them. And I'm like, this is awesome. This is what I came here for. Wow. And so that was like the coolest thing ever. Story goes downhill from there. This bull, he eventually does come in, and he does it perfect. And he came in, like, I heard him coming. I knew exactly where he was going to come. I kind of ran up to like, okay, there's a trail. He's coming down that. Like, I'm going to be right here. It's going to be perfect. And he like literally does exactly what I thought he was going to do. And this had been going on for so long. Like, you get that adrenaline rush, and then you get that another adrenaline rush. Well, that was all gone because this has been going on for 2 hours. So I was just dialed in. I was like, oh, here he's going to walk down the trail. I'm going to draw. I'm going to kill him. This is what's going to happen. So he walks out. He comes exactly where I thought he was. There's a tree that he's got to cross to kind of get right to that 20-yard mark. He goes behind the tree. He's just walking. I draw my bow. I even wait for a few seconds because he's fully frontaled at me. He takes a couple steps. He's 20 yards broadside. I'm like, this is it. This is the moment. So I put it right on him, let the string go, and the arrow I don't even know what happened. It just came out 2 feet high. Like the minute it left the string coming out the front of the bow, I could tell the trajectory was long, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. What happened?
Welcome to traditional archery.
Yeah, and I mean, I literally cut the hairs on the top of his back. I mean, I thought I spined him at first, and I got close enough and hit meat, I think, and he freaked out and kind of bombed back where he came from, never to be heard from again.
Just a light flesh wound.
And I think I even went over the spine, and I got into like flesh and fur.
Yeah,
skin. Nothing there.
Yeah.
Not a drop of blood, not anything.
Oh man, what a letdown after all that. That
well,
must have been hard.
The worst part is, Dave has just spent 2 hours going to elk calling university for me and doing this whole song and dance. And he could tell there was a shot.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an impact sound, and the bull blew up, never to be heard from again. So I walk out of the woods, and he's like doing that kind of thing, and I'm just like doing the break my bow kind of thing. And I didn't even know what to tell him. I was like, I literally just took off my hat, and I was just like, I gave him this look, and he was just like, no. And it honestly took me like 24 hours to put it together. What happened? I replayed it. I didn't sleep that night. And I had to drive home the next day, which is the worst because I had 9 hours to sit there and replay those 20 seconds in my head.
Dude.
But I know what happened because there's a few times in practicing this summer I did this when I kind of let my mind slip for a second. But in compound, when you shoot a compound bow, you're always, your anchor, you're looking through your peep sight, and you put your pin on the target. And I think what I did in the heat of the moment is, I looked for that pin on the target. And so I was drawn back, and I put the point of the broadhead on his vitals.
That would make complete sense because at 20 yards, that would be...
That's super high.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like you miss the target when you're shooting in your yard when you do that. And I've done it a few times over the course of the summer.
Was your anchor point for trad bow the same as your compound?
No, totally different.
That could be it too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that are different. The problem is it's close enough that like in the heat of the moment, you revert to what you know.
Yep.
And my instincts, your instinctive shooting is not like what I do with the trad bow.
Well, in the tactical world, they say in the moment of intensity, you default back to your highest degree of training.
Yeah.
Whatever your highest degree of training is like your mind will auto default back to it. And that's probably what just happened.
Yeah. It took me a full day, 24 hours to put it together. And I remember the moment I was driving back in the car and I just replayed it, and it didn't make me happier. It made me mad. I had to call somebody. I actually called Mike Lee.
Oh, okay.
I just need to talk to somebody who gets it. I just need to vent about this whole thing because I finally put 2 and 2 together. And I mean, I think the summary of the whole trip is I went into this trip trying to do this thing that no one really does, right? There are very few people in the world that hunt elk successfully with the trad bow on public land by themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, if you're going to paint 10 out of 10 difficulty, you pretty much hit 10 out of 10.
Yeah, especially and I had Dave calling for me last night, which was the difference maker. I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity without a caller.
Right.
Because I was already 2 hunts into this bull. I knew he wasn't going to break that distance without hearing something further back or seeing something.
Yeah.
And so I did have that luxury at the end of the trip. But the thing that stings me the most is that I went into the trip with no expectation of needing an elk to be successful. But when you get that close to success, and you're like, oh my goodness, it was there. I could have done it. I should have done it. I've executed that shot in my backyard all summer. It was 20 yards. That's literally what I practiced all summer.
Yeah.
And to muff it in that moment is just super frustrating. It's honestly hard to live with. Yeah. I'll probably replay that. I'll probably go on a ton of successful hunts, but that'll be one that I replay for decades in my head.
But what a cool opportunity though. If I was thinking about your big takeaways, what I just heard, the fact that you even got to be able to get opportunities with a trad bow. I mean, 9 out of 10, archery elk hunters don't even get opportunities with a compound bow a lot of times. Maybe I'm off on the statistics, but it's something close to that.
Yeah.
I've had years where I've had minimal opportunities, but you did the preparation. You were able to go into a location that gave you those opportunities. You're physically ready to do it. You're mentally ready to do it. You checked all those boxes. There was just that last 0.5% that had to come together, and you had one pinwheeled branch and one flopped arrow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a great trip for a lot of ways. And honestly, thinking about faith and talking about that for a second, I feel like God does some things sometimes just to keep me humble. And I was kind of trying to take peace in that. I was like, I probably needed some humility. That's why that happened to me. I need to take that lesson in and think about that a little bit. And
the 2 things that 9 out of 10 times or 99 out of 100 times would have come out with a positive, you have to wonder sometimes if it's okay, Lord, well, okay, I'm going to have to sit with this one for a while.
Yeah. The other thing to just reflect on the trip is just is a lot of time alone. And I think as a one-off experience, I really cherished that time. I mean, there's a lot of time in the middle of the day, I sat down by the river one day for 2 hours and I ate a a bar. That took me 2 hours to eat, but I was like, I got nothing to do today.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. And just being alone with your thoughts that long, I think there was some real like character building in that. And being totally on your own that far in the backcountry and just having to think about all your decisions and the potential repercussions in that way of having nobody right there to help you. But honestly, I think I don't know if I'm in a hurry to do it again. I mean, this point in our lives, we're busy, we have families. You think about that a lot being gone. But it's also like I just enjoy sharing with people in an experience. Even like, let's just say we share a camp. Even if we go off and spend the whole day apart and go hunt, just having that like, oh, we're going to come back and eat dinner and have camp, and you're going to tell me about your day and I'm going to tell you about mine. It's like, it just adds to the day, and I miss that part. Like,
Well, there's something so powerful about fellowship, or I think the Greek or Hebrew is koinonia. There's something super that goes completely beyond what we can mentally wrap our head around, and it's like this, I don't know, like a spiritual or emotional, whatever, uplifting of just relationship. And I think that's what the absence of that is so noticed when we have it all the time with our families and our friends and everything else. When that's gone, like I come home from those trips, even with like just, one or two of my brothers going, and I'm like, man, I really miss some of the things that I'm used to that I take for granted every day. Like those trips are a reset for me. So, anyway. But so just to switch gears for a second, going back to, in general, how did, like, as far as going into that, you had a bunch of gear and different things you were taking with you. You already hit on the filtration issue. What were the positive takeaways? What things worked really well for you in the backcountry and on this trip?
on the gear side?
Yeah.
Well, I shout out to Duck Camp who hooked me up with a bunch of apparel.
Yeah.
I wore some of their new merino gear, which I'm a huge fan of merino wool.
Absolutely.
I literally brought one outfit to wear all week. I did bring a backup pair of pants, which I only do because of a past experience. I blew out a pair of pants and didn't have a backup on a trip probably, I don't know, 8 years ago in the backcountry in Colorado. I just completely shredded a pair of pants walking through deadfall. Literally like pieces of, material are hanging.
Yeah.
And it was kind of miserable. And so I learned to bring an extra pair of pants, but I honestly didn't need them. I wore the same pair of pants all week. They make this kind of like just all-weather pant. I wore long underwear on it. They're kind of wool underwear just because it was cold at night and I slept in it and I just was kind of lazy, so I kept it on. But these pants are waterproof enough. I could run across streams and, with them over my waterproof boots. Like I got away without wearing gaiters all week.
Oh, wow.
Which was really nice. They held up really well, didn't stretch in the belt. So that was really neat. Just the layering system I had worked out really well. I brought like just enough where when it got cold at night, I wasn't cold, but I didn't have extra gear. I did have a set of rain gear I didn't end up using, but it's not like I would have left that at home because anybody who's been on a trip like that and gotten stuck in the rain knows you don't leave that at home.
Yeah.
So apparel all worked out really good. Again, shout out to the folks at Duck Camp for just making really good technical hunting gear. My tent system worked out pretty good. No complaints there. I got a Stone Glacier sleeping bag that just super packable and warm. That worked out really well. 20 degree, or I think it's actually a 14 or 15 degree bag, and I was warm in that every night. Yeah.
So what would you do differently if you had to go back?
Not other than
shoot more.
Yeah.
Other than your water filter and shooting.
Honestly, I thought about like the changes I would make to my recurve, my traditional bow shooting technique. And what I would go back and actually do is create like a 20-yard zero mark on my bow. Where, like for me, it's hard to explain, but like on the actual rest where the arrow sits, there's a mark that I kind of reference that's like 1.5 inches above where the arrow shaft lays on the bow. And I wish that I had gone through and I'd put like a silver Sharpie, just like a line or a dot, where it's like my system was like anchor here, look down the arrow shaft and kind of line up left, right, and then move up and down to where I instinctively was learning the arrow needed to be, which was about 1.5 inches down from where I should have put that mark. And I feel like if I had put that mark there, I could have made my check down system, 1, 2, 3, shoot. And instead I was just doing 1, 2, and then trying to be instinctive in the heat of the moment. That's where I think I just got to the end of the shaft and put it on the target.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely change that.
Well, it's wild in the instinctive world. I shouldn't say instinctive, because rarely do people shoot true instinctive. They're either shooting a gap or walking the string or doing something. But I think what you're talking about is dialing in your gapping so that your gap system actually worked better for you instead of just having one reference point.
Yeah, the other thing, I didn't shoot with anybody that really knew trad bow shooting. I watched some YouTube videos, but I was just out here in my yard. I'd shoot 20 to 40 arrows a day, depending on the day, and just kind of figuring it out. And I wish I had taken the time to just even just call my buddies at Archery Country and get 30 minutes on the phone. And they would have done that, and I probably would have learned to do exactly what I'm telling you I should have done. Something like that, where I create another anchor point.
Yeah.
So that was a big learning. And honestly, I feel like if I ever do get into trad bow hunting, I feel like that is a learning I won't forget, which have to take a little bit of value in, although I don't know if I'm going to rush to go on another trad bow hunt.
Sure. Well, big takeaway for you, it's worth it. That's what I'm hearing. It was a worthwhile adventure.
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about it, but I just seek big adventure.
Yeah.
And this was big adventure, right? By yourself, wilderness, elk, rut action, recurve bow. It was big adventure, and scratch the itch. I'd sign up to do it again tomorrow, even with the heartbreak at the end of the trip. It was worth it. And it's hard.
Just being in that country is rejuvenating, on so many levels. It's exciting, it's adventure, but man, you come home, at least for me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. When I came home from Alaska last year, Idaho, I was just work was better, life was better, everything had a fresh outlook.
Yeah, your perspective is better.
Yeah,
for sure.
My wife jokes that she goes, a lot of wives dread when their husbands go hunting. She goes, well, I get a refreshed version of mine back, so it's worth that period of time. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what's next? What's your next?
Well, before we go into that, there's an interesting comment about wives and relationship to hunting.
Sure.
Because I think my wife and I, and anyone else who's married, can relate to this, in the push and pull of hunting taking you away too much or not enough to scratch your needs. And so we've been through the, balance is great, balance is totally out of balance, and there's a problem. We've been through that, right?
Yeah.
In 8 years of marriage. And actually, I missed our anniversary this year to go on this trip.
Ooh.
But that was totally my wife's offer.
Oh,
and she was like, look, I want you're going with a recurve, our anniversary's in the peak rut, take me up on it for real, and we'll do a makeup anniversary, which we did this Saturday, and it was great.
Oh, cool.
But I think what I'm getting to is positivity from her, especially when I was alone, was super important. And I knew that going in, especially because I'm reaching out to you via this device that I can text in 1990s style.
Oh, yeah.
And there's very little communication, but I'm getting 2 to 3 texts back and forth a day on the inReach.
Yeah.
So if those texts are bad, and that's all I have to think about, I start being bad. Things start going downhill, right?
In your mind.
And actually the low of the trip for me was the first night I got in the backcountry. Literally set up my tent. I'd gone up and looked at elk across the valley, and I'm going back to my tent to go to sleep. And I kind of hit a low, right off the bat, which was totally unexpected. I just started thinking to myself, what are you doing? You just walked 14 miles by yourself, and I was just looking at my stick bow hanging on the edge of the tent. I was like, and that's the only weapon you have. What are you doing? It's you have a family, you have responsibilities, this is your hunt for the year. What are you doing? And I hit that low, and I texted my wife actually, and I was just I don't really know if this was a good idea. I'm in over my head back here. And she immediately responded in inReach time, which is 20 minutes.
Exactly.
I saw it right before I went to bed, and it was basically this super positive, no, you're doing what you love. We're fine. We got everything set up here. Don't worry about us. Just go do what you love and focus on that and enjoy it. And it was that's all I needed to hear. And my spirit's okay, she's right. This is the trip I've been looking forward to.
Yeah.
I just need to suck it up, and I'm going to go hunt with this thing, and it's going to be a blast. And honestly, I'd never, at any point the rest of the week, with the bear in the tent or the thunderstorm or the hike or anything, the water bladder, I never got to another low. It was always just consistently positive, great experience. But if she hadn't have been uplifting in that moment, it could have been a totally different story. I could
Yeah,
have just
no.
kind of gone down that negative path, especially when you're by yourself, and just like talked myself into like being in a bad place.
Yeah.
And so
I
shout out
thought,
to her for, I told her, I mean, that was like a turning point in the trip for sure.
well, I'll tell you what, nothing will ruin a trip quicker for me than feeling like something is not right back
Yeah.
home. Like, yeah, the wheels come off for me. I'm like cutting the trip early, coming home. Like, fortunately, I don't think that's ever really happened where it was like wrecked a whole trip. But for a moment here or there, like when kids are, doing this or doing that, like you just kind of feel guilty. At least I do.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh,
I have wrecked a
I'm
trip.
out here having fun and doing this stuff, and then my wife's miserable at home or whatever that might be. But I think communicating and really sharing like my heart about why I do what I do or why I like doing it has been tremendously helpful in Juliana being like, no, go do it, please. Like, now granted, there are times I'm sure that she's like, man, he better be really rejuvenated when he gets home for me to put up with this. But, it's that, that picture of, I guess, her selflessness. And then, it just, for the whole rest of the year, I'm like, or at least ideally, like, I'm just really trying to make sure that we're carving out the time for her and the kids and the other stuff. Because I know I'm taking from September and October, that the other 10 months need to be prioritized.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So what's next?
Yeah, what is next?
Well, for me, I'm tagged out on deer. I ate tag soup for elk, and I got some friends coming out over the next couple weeks to go deer hunting.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get to attempt to show them Southern Oregon.
Right on.
And I'm actually going to New Mexico for an elk hunt this weekend, although I gave my tag away this year.
Oh, really?
It's a private land tag that I've got a crazy cool family connection to this property owner through my grandparents who passed away. But I gave my tag to one of my hunting buddies who's been archery hunting with me for years and just never been successful.
Oh, gotcha.
So I gave him the tag, and I'm going with him just to kind of help usher the trip along and
Right on.
be there hopefully when he gets his first bull.
And that's a rifle hunt?
Rifle hunt.
Right on.
New Mexico. And other than that, just enjoying being home and being refreshed and taking advantage of Southern Oregon in the fall.
September is what? 11 months away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I actually got to go and take my son out of the woods last weekend for his first ever hunting experience, which was kind of cool because he's gotten to, hear my story, especially last year when he could really kind of understand, he's 6 going on 7. He got to hear all the stories about Alaska. He got to hear stories about Idaho. And it's all become a little more real to him. And then this year he got to go out, just opening weekend rifle around here, which I haven't hunted locally in Southern Oregon. I don't even remember the last time I hunted locally with a rifle. Like my wife killed a buck last year. I've gone out a couple times with her, but this is the first time I've held this tag in forever. So it was kind of fun to take him out, and we got to see a bunch of does and stuff. And of course it's hot and the weather's not right, but it was a lot of fun to go out and see his eyes light up at seeing deer on the phone scope. I mean, they're too far away for him to see them. Like, he's trying to see them through the binoculars, and he's trying so hard to see and find anything. He sees them on the phone scope, and he's like, and he's trying to figure out where they are and everything. It was a blast, though.
That's cool.
But,
and you're going elk hunting soon.
Yeah, so I've got both elk and deer tags in Idaho that we leave on the 17th for 10 days, and that's going to be backcountry. I feel a little bit underprepared right now because I haven't done the amount of e-scouting and other stuff I normally do. But fortunately, the guy I'm meeting who lives in Idaho just came out of the unit. He was there this weekend. So I'm excited. I haven't had a chance to talk with him yet to see what he found or how that went, but it'll be an adventure. I just checked the forecast, and it's supposed to be 11 degrees several of the nights.
wow.
Like, oh man, that wood stove's going to get a lot of use in our teepee.
Man, Idaho's still on fire in some parts.
Yeah, it's just to the, we are to the east of one of those big fires. Our whole unit pretty much is okay.
We still got 10 days, so.
And we're supposed to get some precipitation a little bit between now and then, but I mean, shoot, we're still in high fire danger here in Southern Oregon right now.
Yeah,
So
it's been a dry start to the fall for sure.
But yeah, I feel like your season's just wrapping up and mine's just starting, so it'll be
Well, I
good.
still got a bear tag, and I still got a cougar tag, which I've never hunted or seen a cougar really in the wild. So I've seen a lot of dead deer around here because of them, but
I've seen a lot of cats. I've never killed one in a hunting situation, but farm kill, yes.
yeah, we'll have to dig into that on another episode.
Absolutely. Anyway, well, I think that's a wrap.